It was an ordinary day on Earth. The sun rose as usual, and people went about their lives, unaware of the storm that was coming. Cities bustled with activity. The hum of traffic filled the streets, and the world seemed peaceful. But high above, something was changing. In the sky, a strange object appeared. At first, it was small, just a dot in the distance. People noticed it, but no one thought much of it. It was just another satellite or meteor. But as hours passed, the object grew larger and larger, and panic slowly started to spread. Government agencies began receiving reports. News stations interrupted regular programming with breaking news. Something was coming from space, something that wasn't human. Scientists tried to make sense of it, but no one had an answer. It was too large, too fast. Whatever it wasn't from Earth. By noon, the world had stopped. The skies were filled with massive ships, dozens of them, each one larger than any building. They hovered above the cities, casting shadows that could be seen for miles. The people below stared in awe, some in fear, some in disbelief. These ships didn't look like anything humans had ever seen before. They were sleek, metallic, and unlike any technology Earth had. Suddenly, a voice echoed in every language known to humankind, a voice that didn't belong to any human being. It came from the ships, loud and clear. "We are the Cylon. You are weak. You are food." The message was simple, terrifying, and direct. The world fell into chaos. Governments scrambled to respond. Military forces readied themselves, but no one knew what to do. The aliens didn't wait for a response. Their ships began to descend, landing in strategic locations around the world. They made no aggressive move, but the message was clear. They had come to conquer. In one city, the first contact was made. A small group of soldiers was stationed at a local military base, watching as the Cylon ship touched down. It was massive, at least 5 stories high. The soldiers aimed their weapons, ready for anything, but the ship opened its hatch without a sound. A figure stepped out. It was tall, towering over the soldiers. Its skin was smooth, pale silver, and it had no eyes, only dark, empty sockets. It stood perfectly still, its head tilted slightly as if studying the humans before it. The soldiers raised their guns but hesitated. Was this the enemy? Was this the sign of a war? Then, in a voice that echoed through the air, the creature spoke. "Do not resist. You are not strong enough." Before anyone could respond, the creature raised its hand. A wave of energy shot from its palm, knocking the soldiers off their feet. The humans were powerless against the overwhelming force. It was as if their weapons had no effect. The Cylon's technology was far beyond anything the humans had. The soldiers tried to regroup, but the message was clear. The Cylon were not here for peace. They weren't here to negotiate. They were predators, and humanity was the prey. As the alien ship moved into the heart of the city, more creatures stepped out. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was enough to instill fear in the people. The humans watched helplessly as the aliens began to deploy strange devices, sending waves of energy into the ground. Buildings crumbled, and people screamed as the alien technology wreaked havoc on everything in its path. In another part of the world, a small resistance group had formed. They were just ordinary people, farmers, engineers, soldiers, people who never thought they would be part of a war. But now, they were humanity's last hope. Captain Mark, the leader of this group, stood in a small underground base, watching the monitors. He had seen the reports. He knew what was happening. And he knew the aliens had come to destroy everything. But he wasn't going to give up. "We are not just prey," Captain Mark muttered to himself. "We are survivors, and we will fight back." Mark's team wasn't large, but they were determined. They had learned quickly that Cylon were strong, but they weren't invincible. The first battle had shown that. The humans had fought back with whatever they could find, using old military tactics and basic technology to make the aliens pay for their arrogance. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Mark turned to his team. "We don't have much time. The Xylon won't stop until we're all gone, but we won't go down easily." The team nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They had seen the destruction. They had seen their cities fall. But they had also seen something else. The aliens had made a mistake. They underestimated humanity. "Let's show them what happens when you pick the wrong prey," Mark said, rallying his team. They prepared for the fight of their lives. They didn't know if they could win, but they knew one thing for sure. They would not go quietly into the night. They would fight back. They would prove to the Cylon that humans were not helpless. They were not prey. They were predators. As the resistance group moved into position, the Cylon continued their conquest, oblivious to the humans who were starting to prepare their first strike. The hunt had begun, and humanity was no longer the weak prey they had once been. In the shadows, Captain Mark and his team readied themselves for the battle ahead. They knew that the first encounter had been only the beginning. The war was just starting, and the humans were determined to make sure that the Cylon would learn one powerful lesson: never underestimate humanity. The world had changed overnight. Humanity, once certain of its place in the universe, was now at the mercy of an alien force that had arrived to conquer and consume. The Cylon were ruthless. Their ships hovered above cities, casting shadows that terrified entire populations. Their strange, deadly technology dismantled everything in its path. Cities crumbled, and civilizations fell apart. The invaders had shown no mercy, and their message echoed across the globe: "You are food." But humans were not as helpless as the Cylon thought. In the small underground base, Captain Mark stood before a holographic map. His team gathered around him, their faces weary but resolute. They had seen the destruction firsthand, but they had also seen something else. The aliens had made a critical mistake. The Cylon had underestimated humanity's will to survive. Mark's mind raced. The first encounter had proven one thing: the Cylon were powerful, but they were not invincible. The humans had learned something. They had seen the way the aliens fought, the way their ships operated. Humanity had only one advantage now: adaptability. The Cylon might be technologically superior, but humans were resourceful, able to learn and adapt faster than any species that Cylon had ever encountered. "We can't keep fighting them the same way," Mark said, his voice steady but full of determination. "We need to hit them where it hurts. We can't rely on brute force alone. We need to use their own technology against them." His words were met with nods of agreement. The team wasn't large, but it was fierce. Engineers, former soldiers, hackers, and survivors from all walks of life had come together to form a resistance. They didn't have the numbers to face the Cylon in direct combat, but they had something the aliens didn't understand: human ingenuity. As the days passed, Mark and his team began to analyze the alien technology they had recovered from their first skirmish. It was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. The energy weapons were powerful, and the ships were nearly indestructible. But there were weaknesses, small glitches in the system, vulnerabilities in the alien technology that humanity could exploit. It would take time, but with every passing hour, they grew closer to understanding how to fight back. One evening, as the team worked through the night in their underground base, a voice crackled through the communication system. It was a transmission from an unknown source, garbled and broken, but still clear enough to understand. "We've got a plan. We've found something. We need your help." It was a distress signal from another group of survivors, one that had managed to infiltrate an alien outpost. They had discovered something important, something that Cylon had overlooked. They didn't have many details, but the message was clear: humanity was finding ways to strike back. The team jumped into action. They couldn't waste time. The Cylon might have advanced technology, but they were now learning the hard way that humanity wasn't just sitting back and waiting to be wiped out. The resistance was growing, and the humans were learning how to turn the tables on the invaders. The world was different now. What had once been a thriving, bustling planet had turned into a battlefield. The cities were in ruins, governments were in disarray, and humanity was scattered, desperately fighting for survival. Yet, despite all the odds, something was changing. Humanity was no longer the prey that Cylon had expected. The first two battles had shown the aliens that Earth's inhabitants were more resilient, more capable than they had ever imagined. Captain Mark stood on the rooftop of their underground base, looking out at the devastation. The sky was filled with the occasional flicker of enemy ships, their lights casting eerie shadows on the ground below. But the Resistance had learned much over the past weeks. Humanity had adapted, and they were beginning to turn the tide. What had once seemed hopeless now felt like the first glimmers of victory. The information they had stolen from the alien outpost had been a game-changer. It was more than just weapon blueprints. It was a map of the Cylon's operations, their vulnerabilities, and a list of key weak points in their infrastructure. It gave humanity a fighting chance. Mark wasn't naive. He knew that winning this war would require more than just technology. It would take unity. People from every corner of the Earth, from different countries, different cultures, and different walks of life, were coming together to fight back. They had learned that the only way to defeat the Cylon was to put aside their differences and stand as one. "We're ready," Mark said, turning to his team. "The information we gathered shows where their central command is. It's risky, but if we strike now, we can cripple their operations and give humanity the upper hand." The room was silent for a moment as the team processed the plan. This wasn't just a raid. It was the heart of the war. If they succeeded, the Cylon would lose their grip on Earth. If they failed, it would mean the end for the human race. "We don't have a choice," Mark continued, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of the mission. "We hit them hard and fast. We can't give them time to react." The plan was set. The team would infiltrate a Cylon command center in one of their largest cities, a heavily guarded fortress that controlled the alien forces' operations on Earth. The goal was to destroy their communication hubs, disrupt their logistics, and, if possible, cripple their ability to launch reinforcements. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had left. Mark's team was ready. They had trained for this moment. Each of them had a role to play, and they would do whatever it took to succeed. The humans weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of their species. As the team prepared to leave, Mark called them together for a final briefing. "We've lost a lot already," he said, his voice low. "But we're not going to lose anymore. We're going to hit them hard, and we're going to make them regret ever stepping foot on this planet. Stay focused, stay sharp, and we'll win this together." The soldiers nodded, their faces set in determination. They were no longer afraid of the Cylon. They had seen their power, but they had also seen their weakness. The alien invaders had thought humanity would bend, would break under the pressure, but they had made a fatal mistake. Humans were not weak. They were survivors. The mission was underway. The Resistance fighters moved swiftly through the streets of the alien-controlled city, cloaked under the cover of night. The Cylon ships above remained mostly inactive, their shadows looming like ominous clouds. But the humans knew that at any moment, the aliens could be watching, waiting for a sign of resistance. Mark's team moved silently, their training and their technology allowing them to stay undetected. They had learned to avoid the Cylon's advanced surveillance systems. With every step, they grew closer to the heart of the enemy's operations. They reached the outskirts of the central command center, and Mark held up a hand to signal the team to halt. There, standing in front of them, was the Cylon fortress, a towering metallic structure that seemed to pulse with an eerie alien energy. It was surrounded by thick walls, automated defense systems, and countless alien soldiers. Mark turned to his team, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is it. Once we go in, there's no turning back. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we get out. Are you ready?" The team nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They activated their weapons and moved toward the outer perimeter of the fortress. The first obstacle was the Cylon's automated security systems, drones that patrolled the area, their sensors designed to detect any movement. But the Resistance fighters had come prepared. Using the alien blueprints they had acquired, they managed to hack into the fortress's systems, disabling the drones one by one. It was a tense, heart-pounding moment as the team moved closer to the entrance. The guards, unaware of their presence, stood watch, their backs to the approaching humans. Mark signaled, and the team moved quickly, taking out the guards with precision. It wasn't just about strength, it was about speed and stealth. The victory at the Cylon fortress was a pivotal moment in humanity's war for survival, but it was also a reminder of the brutal cost of resistance. The walls of the command center lay in ruins, the power systems of the fortress crippled, and that Cylon were reeling from the blow. Yet Mark knew that the aliens would not retreat so easily. They had been humiliated, and no empire, especially one as formidable as the Cylon, would accept defeat without striking back. As the survivors from Mark's team gathered around their new base, now deeper in the mountains, there was no time to rest. The next step had to be taken before the Cylon could regroup. The Resistance knew that the aliens would now be desperate, and desperate enemies were often the most dangerous. "We've made a dent in their forces," Mark said, addressing the team. "But they'll strike harder. They'll be angry. They won't underestimate us again. Now we need to be ready for whatever they throw at us next." Mark's face was drawn, his features weary from the continuous strain of battle. The loss of comrades, the countless sleepless nights, and the ongoing war weighed heavily on his shoulders. But despite the fatigue, there was a spark of hope in his eyes. Humanity had proven it could fight back, and that had changed everything. The Cylon no longer saw Earth as an easy conquest. Now the aliens were preparing to make their final push to wipe humanity out, but the humans were determined not to let that happen. The human resistance had grown. Survivors from across the world had rallied together, united by their desire for freedom. The underground bases, scattered in cities and wilderness areas, had become hubs for planning, coordination, and rebuilding. The once fragmented efforts of individual groups were now a single unified force. But with this unity came the understanding of the true scope of the challenge. That Cylon had not just invaded Earth, they had claimed it as their own. The entire planet had become a battleground, and the human resistance was spread thin. Despite their victories, the Cylon still controlled vast swaths of land and cities. The odds were still against humanity. "We need one final push," Mark said to his team one evening, as they gathered in the command room of their hidden base. The air was thick with the weight of their mission. One big blow that will shatter the Cylon's command structure once and for all. We have to strike at the heart of their invasion fleet. If we can destroy their main ship, the one coordinating everything, we can cut off their reinforcements and send them scrambling back to their own galaxy. The room fell silent. Mark's words hung in the air, heavy with both promise and fear. The Resistance had done well so far, but this would be their most dangerous mission yet. The alien fleet was formidable, and the main ship was a near impenetrable fortress. "We've gathered everything we could from the last few missions," one of the engineers, Julia, said. "We've reverse-engineered their weapons, and we have the technology to get us inside. But we'll need a team capable of infiltrating their command ship and planting explosives at its core. It'll be risky, and we don't know what defenses we'll encounter." "We've been up against impossible odds since the start," Mark replied. "But we've learned how to fight, and more importantly, we've learned how to win. We can do this." The plan was set in motion. Every Resistance fighter, every engineer, every strategist, and every survivor worked day and night to prepare for the mission. There was no room for error. If they failed, humanity would face extinction. But if they succeeded, they would change the course of the war forever. The night of the mission arrived, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Mark's team, along with a select group of elite fighters, boarded the newly repaired human warships. The ships, once scavenged from the wreckage of the first alien invasions, were now equipped with technology that would allow them to infiltrate the Cylon's fleet. As the ships entered the atmosphere, Mark couldn't help but think about the lives that had been lost to get them here. His heart ached for the friends, the comrades, the innocent civilians who had perished in the chaos of war. But there was no time for grief. There was only time for action. The Resistance fleet reached the Cylon flagship, a massive vessel suspended in space above Earth's atmosphere. The ship was a labyrinth of metal, pulsing with an ominous energy. It loomed like a dark, twisted shadow, a reminder of the alien presence that had tried to dominate Earth. Mark's ship touched down on the flagship's hull, silent and unseen. The team moved quickly, their training kicking in. They had learned from their past mistakes. They didn't expect mercy from the Cylon, and they wouldn't offer any in return. The battle to reach the ship's core was grueling. Alien soldiers clashed with the humans at every turn, their weapons and strength overwhelming. Yet humanity's resolve was unbreakable. They fought with the fury of those who had been pushed to the brink of extinction, their movements fluid and coordinated. No longer the prey, they were the predators, fighting with everything they had. As they approached the heart of the ship, the final obstacle awaited them. Cylon elite soldiers, augmented and enhanced by advanced technology. The fight was savage. The humans had no choice but to push forward, knowing that the success of their mission rested on their shoulders. Mark, his rifle in hand, led the charge, determined to see this mission through to the end. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the core. The countdown began, the explosives were set, and the team retreated, knowing that the moment they had been waiting for was almost upon them. As they fled the ship's interior, a massive explosion tore through the heart of the Cylon flagship, sending shockwaves that reverberated through the enemy fleet. The Cylon flagship crumbled, its once mighty forces collapsing in chaos. The humans had done it. They had struck a fatal blow. Back on Earth, Mark and his team watched from a safe distance as the Cylon fleet began to scatter. The invaders, their command structure destroyed, were now lost and vulnerable. The Resistance had succeeded, against all odds. "We've won," Mark said, his voice soft. The war was far from over, but for the first time, humanity had hope. The Cylon had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. Humanity had proven something the universe would never forget. When pushed to the edge, when faced with extinction, humanity would rise, and they would fight, not just to survive, but to win. As the dust from the destroyed Cylon flagship settled and the echoes of the explosion faded, a heavy silence hung over the battlefield. Mark and his team stood on the observation deck of their makeshift command ship, watching as the remnants of the enemy fleet scattered in disarray. The Cylon forces, once so confident and cruel, were now fleeing for their lives, their massive warships limping away from Earth's orbit, a retreat that seemed almost impossible to believe. But Mark knew better than to think the war was truly over. The Cylon were a proud race. Even now, they would be regrouping, planning their next move. They wouldn't give up so easily. Yet, for the first time, humanity had proven it could strike at the heart of the invaders' power. It was no longer a one-sided battle. They had made their mark, and the universe had noticed. "Is it over?" Julia, one of the engineers, asked quietly as she stood beside Mark, her voice tinged with disbelief. Mark turned to her, his gaze hard. "No, not yet, but we've done something they didn't expect. They thought we were just prey, something to crush and forget. Now, they know who we are." As he spoke, a new transmission pinged on the command ship's monitors. It was a message from a deep space communication satellite. Mark's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't from the Cylon. It was from Earth's surviving governments, the Resistance leaders, the people they had been fighting to save. The message was brief, but the weight of it was clear. Humanity's forces have regrouped. The final push begins now. We fight together. We end this, A wave of hope washed over Mark. For the first time, there was no fear in the air, only the certainty that humanity had already won the most crucial part of the war. The spirit of Earth had not just survived, it had risen.